Coming up on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show.
I feel like we've made great progress on reliability and in some cases user experience. On the business model side, I think we're in the early stages, first or second inning in terms of innovation on business models. There's just so much more we can do, and I really try to partner across the industry to figure out the right way to give these customers the products that they want at price points that are going to be attractive to them.
IoT consumer products are more expensive than their traditional counterparts, often by an order of magnitude. Not good, but makes sense. The tech needs to be financed. But however innovative the products are, higher pricing will cause a headwind. Part of the problem is consumer IoT products are still being sold with traditional product business models. In this episode of the IoT Business Show, I speak with Nate Williams about the opportunity to innovate consumer IoT business models.
All this and more on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show. The people, the business, and the technology of the next generation internet. This is the IoT Inc. Business Show. And now, here's your host, Bruce Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the IoT Inc. Business Show. This show is for business leaders and managers employing the Internet of Things for their business or the business of their customers. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair, and I interview the industry's leading authorities to find out how they use IoT to improve business and create value. If you like this show, subscribe to it on iTunes and go to iotinc.com to check out my complimentary articles, videos, meetups, and webinars.
There's a motherlode of exclusive videos, presentation decks, meetup recordings, and special reports, and soon PDF transcriptions of all my podcasts and videos in what I'm calling Bruce's Private Reserve. Get all these goodies by signing up to my website. It's at iotinc.com using the long version of the registration form. With me today on the IoT Business Show is Nate Williams. Nate is Chief Revenue Officer at August Home, where he's responsible for managing sales and business development. He has over 15 years of experience as a technology executive, entrepreneur, and advisor with executive roles in marketing, product, and business development, as well as corporate finance. I met Nate on stage at Internet of Things World and thought he'd be an interesting guest. So here he is. Nate, welcome to the show.
Bruce, thank you so much for having me on your show, and I'm really excited about talking about Internet of Things.
Well, let's talk about the CRO title of yours. So what type of revenue opportunities have you been working on in the last week or so?
Well, the CRO title is relatively new. For most folks that have been around business for, several decades, it means that I own the revenue number for August. So when we think about monetizing our business, how we work with retailers like Best Buy and Target and Amazon and service providers like ADT and Comcast, it's my team that owns the ultimate revenue generation, selling our products and services. Newer trend, but at the end of the day, I'm the guy you call if you have an issue or an opportunity with an August product.
Well, I remember years ago, this is when Real Networks, I don't even know their current status, but this is when Real Networks was a big thing, and I was interviewing there, and I was talking to their, not CRO, but their VP of sales, and she was telling me that, it's kind of funny, but she was telling me that how she relaxed and how she kind of like calmed down, because there's a lot of stress, right? You are responsible for the revenue number, is she looked into her diamond ring, and that somehow, I don't know. I guess there's a couple meanings there, but how do you handle the stress?
I've had north of a decade in smart home, and started after graduate school at Intel, helping to invest in some of these leading IoT companies like iControl. And so I've seen the ups and downs and the sort of the fits and starts. And so I think part of it is taking a long view in how the market generates sort of value, and also over the past 5 years, we've seen a real explosion, a proliferation in data. And so one of the best things if you're feeling stressed out about how the product is happening or your revenue channel is to, look at some of the available data. So I wake up each morning, work out at 5:30 a.m. I watch CNBC. But what I also start doing is looking at our metrics from August, where I see, number of locks that are activated, sales from August.com. I see sales from our channel partners like Best Buy or Amazon or Home Depot. And, ultimately, the one thing about sales and business development that I find really great is if I put the effort in, I can see the result. The results of the last 90 days pay off when I get to the end of the quarter and I'm able to talk to our board of directors, some of the leading investors in smart home like Comcast and Qualcomm. We just took investment last week from Liberty Mutual Insurance. So I can look them in the eye and be able to show them how we're creating value in this August franchise.
I like that. Gazing into the data versus gazing into the diamond. And I think it's better, because this is something that has changed. The Internet of Things does give us this window into our customers, into our channels. We know what's happening with our products, and I can see how that could be comforting for you.
The topic of Internet of Things, as it's progressed, has become not only an opportunity for executives and managers, but also a source of some stress. And so one of the things I try to do as I'm out there as an advisor or an executive is really help to talk constructively about what the opportunities are and the risks. So when an executive of a large, Fortune 500 company is thinking about taking a, physical device and making that an Internet of Things device, there's opportunities for revenue growth. There's opportunities for expense reduction. You can clearly please your customers, but there's also risk. And so having an open, honest dialogue about that, I think helps people. The other thing that I would say has been so positive, and you're part of this factor, Bruce, is there's just so much great available information through podcasts and Twitter and other blogs. Anybody at any company, early in career, late in career, leading a large company or startup, has the opportunity to learn almost everything about smart home or Internet of Things. And so it's really made it a lot more democratic. It's not just a Bay Area trend.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, speaking of careers, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? And you started a little bit, but your background in IoT.
Yeah, sure. I'm originally from the East Coast, and in the late 90s, I made my way out to California during the Web 1.0 bubble. After going to graduate school at UCLA, my passion was connecting media. I started my career at Walt Disney Company, marketing some of their films as a college student. And my goal was to connect that media side of the house with technology. And so when I graduated from UCLA, I worked at Intel as part of their digital home group. And I was exposed to these opportunities across gaming and media, and also something called smart home at the time. They had made an investment in a company called iControl, which works with ADT and Comcast and Time Warner, providing them the software for their next generation security. And I looked at some of the forecasts from an Intel perspective of how many chips and how much market size. And I said, this seems like a really big opportunity that's about to explode. This was 2005. And so I was a little bit early. I ended up leaving Intel and was the first business hire at a software company called ForHome. That company had been funded by Verizon. And in 2009, 2010, we rolled out the Verizon home monitoring service really early in the category. We had won a bunch of awards. We got acquired by Motorola, and I was part of the executive team at Motorola in a software group that was acquired by Google. And so full life cycle from running a 40-person startup to part of a 4,000-person company, Motorola, and then part of Google. Google divested that Motorola business in 2000, I believe it was 2012. And from that time, I've been back on the startup front lines, advising companies, making angel investments, and also serving as a full-time chief revenue officer. Interesting.
We have some parallels because I started with a small company. We were We went public, and then we were acquired by Microsoft. Microsoft divested us, and then I ended up back at startups as well. So I can relate.
It's a fascinating journey, and one of the things that I'm so proud about is the relationships with some of these larger companies that span the test of time. So there was a networking event for the Internet of Things Consortium last night in San Francisco, and to see contacts that I've made over the years from companies like Ingersoll Rand and Kwikset and Verizon. And, people these days tend to move every, 4 or 5 years to new companies, but we're seeing folks that are progressing the industry. And I feel there's a little bit of collaboration where folks want to do right and make this a real opportunity as opposed to just maximizing, one company's market share.
Yeah, and I think people are viewing the industry that way because they realize that one company can't do it all. Specifically in the Internet of Things, just the interconnectivity and the dependency between products, which adds a lot more value, and companies, which is the ecosystem, that we're going to talk about a little bit later, is the name of the game, don't you think?
I totally agree. One of the issues right now with Internet of Things is if you tune into Bloomberg or read the Wall Street Journal or CNBC, Internet of Things is such big business. If you put that in your corporate statement, if you talk about it marketing, Cisco or IBM, Cognizant, Microsoft, it's big business. And so we're at this point of the industry where we're not yet at the superhighway stage. We're sort of moving from that dirt road to the country road, and there's still a lot of rationalization of who the real winners will be, both in the platform space, like what platforms, is it Apple, is it Google, but also just from core technologies. Who are the right chip vendors? Is it Broadcom or Intel? And so the process will take some time, but when I look at how I predict the future, when you think of the largest names in consumer tech, Samsung, Apple, Google, Amazon, and others, it's so important for them to have an Internet of Things smart home strategy. It's as important to them that 3 to 5 years ago, mobile or social, or even 10 years ago, having a web strategy. So it's really ingrained in the fabric of some of these consumer tech companies to really try to succeed in Internet of Things.
Yeah, and I think if you think about it a little bit, it's kind of a strange phenomenon because what we're talking about, whether it's the dirt road, the country road, but what we're talking about is the early adopters. And generally, in the early adopter phase of any industry, it's not the big companies, it's not the blue chips, it's not the tech giants that are there, it's mostly just startups. But I think by the fact that they are there, making their place, they realize that this is going to be really big. And it's different, right? I think that is a validation of all the hype. We hear about the hype, you see even companies reorganizing their P&Ls so they can separate IoT revenue, which was maybe classified as something different in the past, for these Bloomberg and MSN and all the viewers of them. But it really is this notion of something that, it really is big just by definition that these companies are betting on this small market or putting all this effort in this small market, which is a small market today compared to what it's going to be. Do you see it? Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah, the forecasts have been, quite shocking. There's discussions of 50 billion connected devices on the networks, north of 16 trillion per Cisco of economic value. So it's definitely the law of large numbers. That being said, I think there are great opportunities for startup companies, venture-backed companies to partner with large companies. I know from an operator at Motorola, I wasn't able to get really deep on some real seismic shifts that were happening. So we were focused on content and network management and, things like smart home. Certain categories popped up like recommendation engines where we just couldn't procure the best tech, and we would go partner. So I look at some of the partnerships that my team has done over here. We've partnered with companies like Airbnb. We partnered with Sears. We partnered with Liberty Mutual. And so I think that constructs a great outcome where they get to benefit on our I would say advanced thinking about home access control, and we get the benefit of their, large scale and distribution. So Comcast would be a perfect example. Comcast has north of 30 million subscribers here in North America. They have a award-winning platform, Xfinity Home. We've integrated our August smart lock with Xfinity Home. A Comcast user who buys an August lock can make that work. And I think it helps their story, and it helps us to be validated that we have products that are available in multiple channels.
Yeah, and I think if you abstract what you're saying, it gets us back to this ecosystem. And I do believe, that there is a lot of opportunity for startups. I advise startups, I advise large companies, and one common piece of advice I have is that there are going to be ecosystems based on technical platforms within your industry. And you don't have to wait for that to happen. You can start a business development partnership strategy now. And the large giants, if you're a small company, will be listening to you because no one company can do it all. And the startups will have an opportunity, and the large companies want to work with the startups because of this exact point that you made, is they can't do it all and they need this innovation. So, all right, well, I guess we're hyping it up on our own here. Let's bring it down to earth. You told me you're an early riser. What's something else that most people don't know about you?
Well, I've spent a majority of my career in sales and business development roles, but I like to fancy myself also pretty technical. So I'm participated, named on 2 patent filings that are quite technical. I spend a lot of time with the engineering team working on some of platform technology. And I think it's important for any person that's in a market-facing role to sort of get under the covers and really understand at the core level how these building blocks of smart home and IoT are coming together. So I think that the other personal fact would be I have 3 children under the age of 6. So I've been able to juggle 10 years of startups plus competitive cycling with a marriage and 3 kids.
Okay. I was going to ask you about the cycling, but I did not know that you had the young children as well. So that is a challenge. Maybe 5:30, you need to start getting up a little bit earlier, I would say.
You can get up earlier, Bruce, but you'd have to go to bed earlier. And so I prefer to go to bed after the sun goes down.
Well, I agree with what you said about having to understand. I mean, this is, again, something that's pretty unique about the Internet of Things. It is so technical. And I think to be an effective manager, to be an effective business person, you have to understand at least how it works. Not enough to write the code yourself, but you have to understand, how it works. And why don't we start there? I mean, if you could, let's get a little techie. And before we get into the business side of things, maybe describe the technical components of your product line.
Yeah, sure. So August has been shipping product for the past year and a half. We're based here in San Francisco. We're a venture-backed company, raised $50 million, and we're focused on access control. We care about people, products, and services entering that front door. And so our products that are currently shipping are the August Smart Lock, which is a retrofit lock. It's the CNET Editor's Choice best lock out there. It supports Apple HomeKit. It works with Nest, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. We also recently launched the August doorbell camera. Gives people the ability to see and speak with visitors at their front door, no matter where you're at. If you're overseas on a business trip, you're in the office, it gives you that peace of mind and comfort to know that somebody's there and you can let them in. And that's one of the key components of what we do, is really making folks feel safe and secure at that front door. We want to keep the bad people out and let the good people in. So we built those products with 2 accessories. And really, from a technological perspective, it's quite complicated. So first is the hardware component. We're making physical products that use, leading edge materials, aluminum. We have, motors for the locks that are imported from Japan. But where hardware ends and software starts is really the elegance. So when I look at successful smart home products, whether that's from Sonos or Nest or Amazon Echo, the best technology sits in the background. it gives you this sense of purpose and gives you this sense of efficiency, but it doesn't take up too much of your time. And so where we've really focused on our tech is making it seamless. The lock is a 10-minute install. So inside your deadbolt, there are 2 screws. You unscrew those inside your home, and you can put the August smart lock on with 2 wing latches. It's very discreet. Nobody from the street can see that you have a smart lock, etc. And then you can use your iPhone to let you in and out of the house. You can give guest keys away. Same thing with the doorbell camera. We've really focused on that, being able to capture video at the front door. So I want to know if the FedEx person dropped off a package. I may have somebody coming like a dog walker. That's an area that we've really gotten a lot of cool interest from. Is, you want to see when people show up, and you want to make sure that everything's okay in your home. And so one of the things that's important for us is that burning, stressful sensation you feel middle of a work day. Did I lock the door? What happened to that package? Did somebody show up? We're hoping to give people the safety and comfort that they can know and trust in our brand to deliver that.
Well, let's talk about now where that hardware ends and the software begins, the back end. So, just scratching at the technology a little bit. You mentioned that it's for access control, and you mentioned that you can do it with your phone within proximity, but you can also do it from a distance, right? And I'm interested not only how you do that technically from a distance, but also the back end, again, that's needed to support this access control that you've been talking about.
It's a great question. And so we have developed a good team that's hardware focused, but we've also built out a relatively large software team with backgrounds that include names like PayPal, names that include Bank of America, eBay, Rovi, which is one of the leaders in content here in North America in terms of conditional access. So the way to think about an access control is you're basically authenticating users that have certain granted access to a home. They could be a person who's only allowed to enter once. It could be the owner of the home who decides that she wants to give a key to a guest. And so what we end up doing in the cloud is managing those levels of permission. We manage through OAuth and other means the integration with other platform services. So like, for example, a Honeywell or Comcast or Airbnb. And so from a software perspective, what we're trying to do is make sure that your experience, whether you're in the home, local, or you're remote, gives you the ease of use to let people in, to give digital keys, and also see what's going on. So we're using some of the newest and best web technology. We're obviously very focused on safety and security, encryption, authentication, denial service, things like that.
Yeah, and you've given me some good company titles. Give me some job titles and talk a little bit more about the cloud. Did you build your own cloud? Did you rent the cloud? How'd you go about that? Because that is a big part of the back end.
Yeah, I mean, one of the hottest categories right now in engineering is the whole category of DevOps, development ops. And so although startups start small, the difference between just a mom and pop business and a startup is the expectation of hypergrowth. So startups go through phases where the user base grows 100x or 10x or 1,000x. And so you have to prepare to scale. And so luckily here on our team, we have leaders who came from companies such as Basis, that was acquired by Intel, Jawbone, Motorola, Google, Netgear, Sling Media. And so we built the software backend to scale rather rapidly by putting the right engineering talent in place that does things like make sure that we have the most up-to-date iOS app, or make sure as there's new versions of Android that are announced at Google I/O that we have engineers there. The other part on the network is stability. So we talked about DevOps, Bruce. Having folks that are focused on making sure that we have 99.99 reliability, that the servers are always up, that we have infrastructure that allows our call service folks, our customer support, to be able to, remotely diagnose and troubleshoot problems. That's really important for us. So if I can make the analogy of 5 years ago when we were starting to launch a collaboration with Verizon on smart home, there was only a small amount of data available about the device and its status inside the home. A lot of times it was very difficult. Now we have the ability, to help these products stay online longer and have a much better quality. And the other part, because you mentioned before, the market is so integrated, right? So Nest integrates with Chamberlain and Schlage integrates with others, is you not only have to make sure you have the stability, you have to ensure the stability in the partner engagements. So if a consumer has a problem and they can't, get Comcast, that's also an August problem if they end up having our lock in their home.
Who do they call?
Well,
I guess it depends on the relationship.
It depends on the relationship. You have to train your team to basically, triage the call, understand, what side of the relationship the technology is sitting on, and then put that call to the appropriate contact. The cool thing about, being in a startup is, you see real time. I purposely sit my team next to customer support and near engineering so I can hear customer support taking calls and hearing about positive experiences and other improvement areas. And I actually see the process of us translating those calls into either bug reports or feature requests and walking them down and talking to engineering. So it's cool to be able to have that, feet on the ground to understand how the product's being made and how every day we're improving.
Yeah, and how it's affecting your customers. Now, a big part of our audience are startups, and I'm wondering, what's your recommendation for the back end? Do you recommend that a startup that's building their business lease or work with an existing platform? Do you think you should just go straight to the cloud and work with an existing cloud provider, or is this something that you recommend that they build themselves? Because you're mentioning, SLA, scalability, stability. So these are all pretty important issues, and perhaps a little bit challenging for a smaller company.
It's a great question. And if we were talking 10 years ago, part of, the startup funding would include buying racks of servers and having to build out infrastructure. So the benefit of crowdfunding plus the benefit of folks that will rapidly prototype a hardware product plus rack space and AWS really helps for a startup to find the idea and the execution that's going to win. So, I read an article this morning about Amazon and AWS. They purchased an asset called telemetry. Amazon is making a very strong push into enabling, Internet of Things. They have a framework for IoT. They have SDKs. They have something called Kinesis Analytics for some of the data that's generated from IoT devices. So, depending on the company and the use of the data, a lot of the third parties, Rackspace, AWS, you would never be able to get that scale or pricing if you did it internally. So when I talk and advise entrepreneurs, it's really focusing on the progression of a startup from angel funding to Series A to Series B, et cetera, is about de-risking the business. It's about asking a set of questions that allow you to answer them. And when you answer them, it determines if the startup is viable. So some of the earliest questions when I'm investing in a company or advising is, do you have a market that's big enough? Do you have a customer that's willing to make a commitment to buy your product? Is the value prop attractive? Can you execute on the technology? If you say it's going to cost $30 to make, if it costs $50 to make and it takes a year longer, you don't have a sustainable business. As you get later in the life cycle of the company, in our peloton of smart home companies who are relatively large, well-funded, companies like Canary, Ring, us, and others, you're at a different part of the business. You've already raised a good amount of money. You have wide distribution. You have lot of customers. Now it's really about how do we continue to scale the business in a way that leads to international distribution, that allows us to expand the product lines. And then what are some of those really big partnerships, whether it be a Walmart or an Amazon Echo, that can turn, from single digit percentage of adoption to, the same adoption we're seeing with smartphones.
Okay, so I think what you're saying then, at least, I'm kind of stuck on this, obviously, but what you're saying on the cloud part is that work with a cloud provider. Maybe it's Amazon, maybe it's Rackspace, maybe it's one of the others, and they will kind of grow with you and de-risk your business to a certain extent.
Absolutely. And then plan for redundancy and all that in your DevOps. So you have to make sure that you have, scalability and redundancy. If you're using video, you have to have load balancers in place.
Yes.
That you have to be able to predict the pricing. So one of the pitfalls in smart home is folks underestimate the cost of keeping a connected device on the cloud, especially if it has video. So they'll offer a service and they forget that the service is still going to be connected 3 years from now, and they're going to continue to have to pay those server bills.
Yeah, well, that brings us to a good story. I'm off the tech. I'm into the business model now. So that brings up a good point. If you are going to have a back end to provide this, this wonderful, seam between where hardware ends and software begins, but it's going to cost you something. And so the revenue model is going to have to accommodate it. What is then your company's business model? Because you do have to maintain this back end. You do have video. You are going to need this load balancing. So how do you make sure that you're paying the bills internally?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a hero company in smart home, very similar to a Sonos or Nest in terms of our go-to-market strategy. The first tip of our distribution is at retail, where we work in the U.S. and Canada with leading distributors. And then we've also focused on service providers and security. So the business model is really around, hardware that consumers love and buy. And obviously we've made a business from that. And, as we continue to grow the business, there are opportunities for us on the software side because we're supporting our security partners and others to have recurring revenue. So it's very important as we talk about business model that we think about all the different ways that, these products can be monetized. Traditionally, the thinking has always been that it's a self-pay market for smart home, meaning, Bruce, you have to come up with $500 or $1,000 to outfit your house with a thermostat, a smart lock, an IP camera, et cetera. If we look at U.S. disposable income trends and just general income, it's around $53,000 a year across 115 million U.S. households. And so we look at some of these other industries, for example, security. It costs between $1,200 and $1,500 to acquire a security customer, to Bob's security, monthly service. Insurance, it's very pricey for them. They market, they're a top 10 television advertiser, very expensive for them to acquire and retain customers. So if I'm being open about the industry, I feel like we've made great progress on reliability and in some cases user experience. On the business model side, I think we're in the early stages, first or second inning in terms of innovation on business models. There's just so much more we can do. And I really try to partner across the industry to figure out the right way to give these customers the products that they want at price points that are going to be attractive to them. I feel like we've made great progress on reliability and in some cases user experience. On the business model side, I think we're in the early stages, first or second inning in terms of innovation on business models. There's just so much more we can do. And I really try to partner across the industry to figure out the right way to give these customers the products that they want at price points that are going to be attractive to them. Meanwhile, it sounds like a run-on sentence, but I think it's very important. Meanwhile, protecting the integrity of their data and their privacy, right? There's a lot of, pushback on smart home and Internet of Things based on risk and concerns on privacy.
Sure. No, and I want to dig into that. So, but for August Home, let's start with the product where you can use your iPhone to open up the lock. Again, is that a one-time purchase of hardware, or is there some sort of recurring fee that the customer needs to pay, or does that come with the remote access?
Yeah, so it's a one-time fee for the product. We sell it at leading retail. The August HomeKit edition is $229, and there are no additional fees tied to it. We made a decision early in August that some of our competitors charge for digital keys. If you want to get an additional key, they may charge $1 or $2. We decided we didn't want to do that, so there are no fees in terms of once you buy the product, and we'll support that product for as long as you have it. The August doorbell camera that recently launched, we announced with the launch that we'd be rolling out a premium service to support customers who want to archive that video. So we haven't announced all the details of that, but there is a subsegment of customers who don't want the free service. They want to be able to, record longer video, keep it for long periods of time, have archives, et cetera. And so we'll be having that part of the business in the next 30 to 60 days.
So then for the August lock, then you're amortizing the cost of the back end over the lifetime of the customer and including it, in that one-time fee. For the doorbell, then that makes a lot of sense. That is a premium service, and one of them may be, hey, you want to take a look in the past. And what about the remote access? Because I know there's also a remote capability where you can perhaps open or see what's going on when you're not locally. Or is that tied into the doorbell?
Yeah.
There's also a component for the lock too, isn't there?
Great question. It's important for both. We want to make sure that our consumers get the product and really solve the first use case. And the first use case is, I'm busy and I'm walking home. I may have a bag of groceries in my backpack and I can't fumble with my keys. And so we solve that issue. You don't have to even take your phone out of your pocket. We use a technology with geofencing called auto unlock that once you break that geofence around your home, it detects your presence and unlocks the door. So for me, it's a lifesaver carrying a kid or bike or things like that.
Or 3.
Exactly. Carrying 3 is definitely a little risky, but I've been known to do it. So we don't charge for that. The remote access, we have a Connect bridge, which is a Bluetooth Wi-Fi bridge that sells Amazon and other places, August.com, for $79. And that allows our Bluetooth lock to get out on the network. And through that, you can, perform remote access. You can, see what's happening remotely, understand is it locked or unlocked, see a status log. And so we don't charge a premium service for that as well. It's you buy the product and you have the connectivity.
Interesting. I mean, what I'm trying to tease apart here isn't necessarily August in particular, but it's the point that you brought up earlier. Is I also believe that the business model, innovation in the business models are still at the early stages. And what you really need to do is somehow bring your business model. Now, I normally work, you're really actually, I think, maybe one of my few consumer guests, but normally it's on the commercial industrial infrastructure side. And so what you're trying to do is align your business model with the customer's business model as much as possible. And that generally reduces the monetization friction. In this case, it's interesting because you're talking about consumer disposable income and the business model. There isn't, talk to this to me a little bit, Nate, there isn't really, or what is the business model of the consumer? Because, or do you even think about it in the terms that I was saying earlier, where you've got a business model, you obviously have to pay the back end cost, the bills in some way or form, but you also want to interface that business model with the consumer. But do they have a business model, or is that where you're getting at with this notion of disposable income? And maybe talk to that a little bit.
It's such a good question, Bruce, and I know that you cover a lot of enterprise here on your show and consult in that. I look at innovation that I saw with smart meters back in 2009, 2010. That business model actually worked quite well both for consumers and the industry. Utility was able to partner with innovative companies like Silver Spring Networks and reduce their overall production of energy during peak demand times. Meanwhile, the consumer benefited in cost and saved money by having a smart meter installed. So when I look to the consumer side, some of these discussions that we're having now is how can, insurance companies, security companies, service providers like Comcast and Verizon take an active part in smart home and allow a consumer to get these products and services at a much lower cost. Meanwhile, they get the savings of not having to, maybe market as intensively, or they can keep a customer for longer. Or, what we see with a lot of our August partners is they really want to make their customers happy. They want them to have these great products that are going to help them be safe and secure. So I would say, per our discussion at IoT World, we're still in the early stages. And for a product executive like myself, I can't presuppose that that's going to happen. So we have to run our business currently, making the business successful on selling our products directly to consumers.
So what you're saying, though, is the business models as they stand today is pretty much the same. We're going to be selling it once and done, but we're working with other partners to see if there's a way to, pump up the business model in such a way that you can offset the costs by providing these partners some useful information. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Absolutely. I'm very hopeful that will happen. Clearly, we're seeing accelerating sales across a lot of categories. Folks, are willing to buy products that they think have utility in their life. Once you get, through that early adopter, early majority segment into, the late majority, that's where you really have high price sensitivity and folks want to be sold. That's where it became part of an insurance, homeowners insurance policy or something like that. We could grow the industry. So I wouldn't necessarily call it an August issue. This is more of an issue at the core of smart home. When we look at media or gaming, there are business models that are basically baked. When I watch a 30-minute television show, there's 22 minutes of content and 8 minutes of ads. I don't have to pay for Facebook. And Facebook pays for servers because they target you with ads. So I think smart home still needs some more work to figure out the final business model. But in the meantime, I think consumers are benefiting from great products and good services.
Yeah, and I think, this kind of leads us into more outcome-based economy, more outcome-based thinking. So what are your thoughts on the home platform and as a company ecosystem? Where is it today and how do you see it evolving? Because it's very much related to what we're talking about now.
Absolutely. Same way that, large Fortune 500 businesses run on, Cisco backends and they work with Symantec and AWS. That's similar to what will happen eventually in the homes. So from an August perspective, we have an ecosystem of, remote access, smart access products. We're not building a platform. When we think of the platform, think of that superhighway and the connectivity between the devices in the home. That's the ground that Samsung and Google and Amazon and Apple are playing. And so there's a lot of discussion around how does a Samsung connect their washer and dryer to a TV and all the devices. Right now, from my perspective, 10 years in the business, consumers don't have the problem yet that a platform solves. A platform solves a problem where you have multiple devices that could be more efficient if they're operated in concert. We're still at a stage where if you take a Clayton Christensen, Harvard Business School kind of paradigm, you hire the product for the job. If I want to allow people in my home remotely and go keyless, I buy in August. That's what I do. Very few people are kind of mixing the platform together. Now, over time, if you believe these analyst projections, and I believe them to be directionally correct, when you have 5 or 10 smart home devices in your home, that's where these platforms make sense because they allow those products to be operated together. They can be managed. You can set a scene. So I know something that's a little bit funky for me with all the different, devices I have in my home is, okay, I want to turn down my lights. I have to do that. Then I have to lock my door. Then I want to arm my security system. So
yeah, with all different apps maybe.
Yeah. And part of that is just the life cycle. Companies are going to assert some leadership and then realize, they should just have the discipline. August is a great case study, and we have the discipline to stay in our lane and focus on the products in and around that front door. We've been very clear. We partnered with Nest. We've partnered with Apple on HomeKit. We don't intend to be the platform. We intend to have the ecosystem. And so I watch with a lot of interest of some of these big battles, but ultimately similar to smartphones, where there are a loyal base of Android users and a loyal base of iOS users. I think it will come down to 2 or 3 really big platforms that have great experience and a lot of scale.
No, I agree, and it's interesting. It's interesting the point that you bring up on the actual need of a platform. Again, in the industrial commercial side of things, there is a need to orchestrate, a number of different products to try to derive or try to deliver a particular outcome. And I think you're right. Obviously that in the home that need isn't there yet. And I would maybe just layer on top of that you could argue that also the business model is going to be individual, kind of discrete, like the products are, until that need is there and there is a ecosystem of all the products within the home. And then maybe you're going to start you'll start seeing these innovations in business models, because it will be not just one company. And it makes sense on the way to that level. You'll be partnering with companies like Nest and partnering with Apple. But I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying? I think it's going to be once that ecosystem and once there is that need for a platform, and the platform is the technical underpinning of the economic pinning of the ecosystem, of the economic system, which is the ecosystem. But it's maybe not going to be until then when we're going to see some real innovation in the home from a business model point of view. What do you think of that?
It'll take a little bit of time. The good paradigm to think about is the home is already quite technical when you think of all the different devices that are currently on the home network, multiple tablets, game consoles, routers. And so there's already the pain point. If you're a service provider and a customer's got 5 or 6 Nest cams, those Nest cams are uploading video, then your child may complain because they can't watch Game of Thrones on a tablet. And so those activities are happening, and that's why there's been a renewed push in the home for quality of service, router management technology that prioritizes packets, et cetera. Something that I wanted to say, we spent a lot of time on consumer. I do think that the enterprise IoT market has a lot of interesting things happening. And one of the things that we can take on the consumer side is enterprise has gotten a lot more sophisticated in terms of using the data from IoT devices to really drive decisions. So whether it's instrumenting medical equipment to be able to charge for time per use, or understanding out in irrigation systems or smart cities how to conserve resources, there's some specific enterprise outcomes that are quite interesting. So some of those same types of services can be used inside the home. So if you think about energy management, if I'm trying to save money, I don't know if I discriminate between my water bill or my electric bill, heating, cooling, et cetera. I just want to, do what's right for the environment and save money. So in that case, I can see something that aggregates data from, how much you're watering your lawn, how much, energy you're using from your Nest or your Honeywell Lyric, and taking it that way. I'm a big believer that enterprise can lead the way for some of the home technologies, particularly around safety and security. Think about connected devices, nuclear power plants, planes, et cetera, that to be very safe and secure. You don't want any of that information to get out. A hack could be very costly. So I anticipate there to be more. One difference, I would say, consumer versus enterprise. the requirements for IoT in enterprise are very verticalized. So
that's right.
Manufacturing, discrete manufacturing versus automotive versus energy and renewables, very, very different. Hard for a single company to span all those segments. Whereas as a connected home expert myself, it's easier for us to think about the home and be able to meet the needs of many consumers with one specific solution.
I agree. And I think, the analogy of the home platform being similar to the mobile platform of, you brought it up, Android or iOS, I think is more real. And maybe there won't be two, there'll probably be maybe 3, 4, like you were saying. You mentioned a couple of the others. But in the industry or in the industrial side, commercial side, these platforms are going to be vertical. They're going to be industry specific, and that's going to have to do with their networking characteristics that they need. It's going to have to do with their analytics characteristics that we need, which we didn't talk about much today. But I see that as being a big difference. But it's interesting, though, because we started a little while ago this thread by saying, maybe we don't need a platform in the home because there isn't really that big problem yet, but what we've talked about too. Number one, we've talked about is quality of service. So service, because like you said, Netflix is now measuring it. We want to make sure that the plumbing is flowing the bits properly. Yep. So that could be a problem you pay for. And then the second problem, but people would maybe pay for is cost. Is reducing the household bill.
That's right.
And that again in both those cases. So I think. Maybe there is some, it's forming anyway. These problems are forming, but unlike industry, they're maybe not as explicit or they're not there yet. But I don't know. We're sort of painting a picture in that direction, I guess.
No, I really like where you're heading with this, and maybe to wrap up on my thoughts. As an entrepreneur and an operator in consumer IoT, you can never go wrong with helping the customer to win. If you think about that customer, him or her out there, and you envision how they're using their product, how it's adding value to their life, it's making their life a little bit easier. Maybe they take a look at the industrial design, it gives them a moment of joy. That's the right way to start thinking about the company development, and it all flows in support of that. I've really learned a lot in this, experience with August. We've spent a lot of time thinking about the consumer and how they want to approach technology, not making it too technical. Building great UX, making sure the out-of-box experience is perfect or Apple-like. And so, my parting thoughts on that, Bruce, would be it's a business that's going to really transform every major industry, healthcare, insurance, service providers, security. IoT is very transformative, but it's a step-by-step process. And so for folks that listen to the podcast, a few recommendations from my part. I think first would be participate in the conversation. A lot of great conversations on Twitter, at trade shows, podcasts. Take an active role in talking about your stakeholders and some of your requirements. Let us know what we can be doing better. I think that's part one. Part two is, take some time to think about how value is created and distributed in the ecosystem. There's a rush to all these partnerships just to announce. My experience in business development over the past 15 years is, generally speaking, 1 or 2 partnerships create 80 to 90% of the economic value, and the rest of the partnerships are just for, PR. I've really tried to be careful here at August to focus on partnerships that are really going to be helpful, and go into it with an idea of how you're going to win and how I'm going to win. And then lastly, what I would say is have a mature view of how the company can win in the sector. It's not going to be a monopoly. So companies that are really trying to own a specific part of the experience or own a specific, have kind of a moat, so to speak. It's just not going to work, and it slows down the industry. One of the bad things about IoT could be if we take too long working on standards. So I really enjoyed getting the chance to speak with you again in a 2-week period. And people can follow me at Twitter, Nay Williams, or at August Home.
And the web address for August? The August Home is August Home?
www.august.com.
August.com. Oh, wow. Did you guys get that early, or did you have to pay a little bit of money for that?
We're very lucky. We have great people, and there are great people out there, and we're on a mission. The name August is synonymous with something that's lauded and beautiful, and so we wanted to represent something that people have a great experience. Traditionally, also in August, you get that family vacation or a little bit of personal time. So we want people, when they think of August, they think of a calm, relaxed, azure experience.
Just like a diamond, baby. All right. Thanks, Nate. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Bruce. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Well, that was episode 54. A great number made up only of 2s and 3s. To get analysis of this episode, links mentioned in the show, and transcripts, go to the show analysis notes. They can all be found at www.iotinc.com/podcasts. Now remember, there is that hyphen between the IoT and the Inc. If you've been enjoying these podcasts, or maybe you really like this one, I could use your help, and that is to leave a review on iTunes. It's very simple. Just takes a couple seconds to leave a star review. Yeah, maybe tens of seconds to leave a written review. But in either case, they'd be both very much appreciated, and they're very helpful when attracting new talent to the show. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair. Thank you for listening. Until next time, may your path to IoT business be a more innovative one.
You have been listening to the IoT Inc. Business Show.